The small diorama box is one of my favorite things to make. You can make anything inside of this little box. This is my pattern. That's the back of the box, and these fold up and this goes over it like that. And so I already fused my fabric, which is so beautiful, laurel birch fabric, and I traced my patterns onto the fabric and cut that out. So next I have to cut these on the lines. So this is fabric that's fused to fast to fuse, which is a stiffener that I use, and I wrote my book about that stiffener. It's filled with projects that you can make using this stiffener. It's one of my favorite supplies to use. So I'm cutting on the lines, and I always keep the pieces attached, so I don't totally cut them off. They're just attached, and then when I'm ready to sew them, I cut them fully off. I just find it's easier to keep track of where the pieces are since there's so many little pieces. So this is the back of the box, and I have to cut all those off, and then I have to zigzag everything back together. So here it is. I zigzagged all the way around the edge, and I zigzagged those pieces together, and then they can fold easily like this. So I'm going to sew those corners together just like that to make it into a box, and then this will get sewn this way. The doors will get sewn onto the sides there. Before I do that, I'll show you my paint drawer. My motto is you can never have too many colors. So before I do the sewing on the corners, I have to paint this. It's just easier to paint it now than paint it after it's sewn together. Now, sometimes I paint the fabric before I sew it together. I use these beautiful oil sticks that you can no longer get. So that way, when I sew it together, I don't have to worry about getting the paint onto the seams. If you get the paint onto the seams, what happens is it makes it harder to bend the pieces. So those little doors, they won't open as well as they will if you don't get paint on them. So that's the benefit of painting it before you sew it all together, because if it's painted before you sew it together, then you don't even have that problem. So here it is dried, and I'm adding a string onto this now before I glue that front on there, because it makes it easier to add the string before. So I like adding a little star bead onto the top of this diorama. And so these are glass beads that I have, and it's kind of a pretty iridescent star, and it really adds a nice little touch. So I always like to add those on, and I'm sewing it on with a super thin needle. It's a beading needle. So I sewed a couple times through the bead and then a few times on the back instead of tying a knot, and then cut that string off. So it's ready to get glued together, and I put glue around the edge of that, and I'm just positioning this over it, and you have to let it dry, of course. Isn't that gorgeous fabric? And there it is, my beautiful diorama. Thank you for watching. See you next time.